in the vast emptiness of the New Mexico desert, where scorching winds carve stories into ancient rocks and silence reigns supreme, a simple cowboy named Jack Turner was about to discover that humanity isn't alone in the universe. What began as an ordinary evening ride through Copper Canyon would transform into an encounter that would shake the foundations of everything we believe about existence beyond Earth. When Jack heard desperate cries echoing through the canyon walls at sunset, he never imagined he was about to save a being from another world, a reptilian creature with emerald scales and eyes that held the wisdom of millennia. This single act of compassion would trigger a cosmic event that would illuminate the night sky with ships and beings humanity had never witnessed, revealing that our small blue planet had just caught the attention of civilizations far beyond our comprehension. What happens when a poor man's kindness becomes the bridge between two worlds? Buckle up, because this story will take you on a journey where the impossible becomes reality. Jack Turner had never been a wealthy man, and he'd made peace with that reality long ago. His weathered hands told the story of 43 years spent working the land, mending fences, and caring for cattle that didn't even belong to him. He lived in a small cabin on the edge of the Morrison Ranch, earning just enough to keep food on the table, and his old horse, Dusty, fed and healthy. The ranch owner, Mr. Morrison, was a fair man, but business was tough, and Jack knew that every dollar counted. Still, despite the hardships, Jack found a certain poetry in the simplicity of his life. The endless horizons, the smell of sage after rain, the stunning sunsets that painted the desert in shades of amber and crimson. On this particular evening in late September, Jack had decided to take Dusty out for a ride through Copper Canyon before nightfall. It was his favorite time of day, when the oppressive heat finally relented and the world seemed to take a breath. The canyon was a place of stark beauty, with towering red rock formations that had been sculpted by wind and water over millions of years. Ancient petroglyphs marked some of the wall's mysterious symbols left by peoples long forgotten, their meanings lost to time. Jack often wondered what stories those symbols told, what lives had unfolded in this unforgiving landscape centuries before he was born. As Dusty carefully navigated the narrow trail that wound along the canyon's edge, Jack's mind wandered to practical matters. The truck needed new tires, the cabin roof was starting to leak in one corner, and winter was coming. He calculated his meager savings mentally, trying to figure out how to stretch them far enough to cover the essentials. Lost in thought, he almost didn't hear it at first, a sound so faint and strange that his brain struggled to categorize it. It was a cry, high-pitched and desperate, echoing off the canyon walls in a way that made it impossible to pinpoint the source. Dusty's ears pricked forward, and the horse stopped abruptly, snorting nervously. Jack held still, listening intently. There it was again, definitely a cry for help, but unlike anything he'd ever heard before. It wasn't quite human, yet it carried the unmistakable tone of distress that transcended species. "Easy, boy," Jack murmured to Dusty, patting the horse's neck as he dismounted. His boots crunched on the gravelly path as he moved toward the canyon's edge, peering down into the gathering shadows below. The sun was sinking rapidly now, transforming the sky into a masterpiece of purple and gold. In perhaps 30 minutes, it would be dark, and navigating the canyon would become treacherous. The cry came again, clearer this time, and Jack's eyes widened as he spotted movement about 40 feet below, on a narrow ledge jutting out from the canyon wall. Something was down there, something that caught the dying light in a way that made Jack's breath catch in his throat. He blinked hard, wondering if the long day in the sun had affected his vision, because what he was seeing couldn't possibly be real. The creature, and there was no other word for it, was roughly humanoid in shape, perhaps 6 feet tall, but that's where the resemblance to humanity ended. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered with an iridescent quality, predominantly emerald green, but flashing with hints of gold and blue as it moved. The head was elongated, with a pronounced jaw and large, almond-shaped eyes that seemed to glow with an amber light in the dimness. As Jack watched, frozen in disbelief, the creature raised one clawed hand toward him in what could only be interpreted as a plea for help. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. His rational mind screamed that this was impossible, that he was hallucinating, that creatures like this existed only in science fiction movies and tabloid newspapers sold at gas station checkout counters. But his eyes told a different story. Whatever this being was, it was real, it was in distress, and it was looking directly at him with an intelligence that was unmistakably present in those strange, glowing eyes. "Lord have mercy," Jack whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind that had begun to pick up. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, his mind racing through options. Every instinct told him to run, to get back on Dusty and ride like hell back to the ranch, to forget what he'd seen and convince himself it had been a trick of the light. But another part of him, the part that had once pulled a drowning calf from a flooded creek at risk to his own life, the part that had given half his dinner to a starving dog that had wandered onto the ranch, couldn't turn away from a creature in need, no matter how impossible that creature might be. The being cried out again, and this time, Jack heard something that made his decision for him. Beneath the alien quality of the sound, there was pain. Real, visceral pain. The creature was hurt, and it was asking him for help. "All right," Jack said aloud, as much to steady himself as anything. "All right, I'm coming. Just hold on." He quickly assessed the situation with the practical eye of a man who'd spent decades working in dangerous terrain. The ledge where the creature was stranded was accessible, but it would require careful climbing. He had rope in his saddlebag. He always carried rope, and his father's old climbing gear that he sometimes used for fence work in difficult areas. The descent would be risky in the fading light, and getting back up with an injured being of unknown weight would be even more challenging. But Jack Turner had never been one to back down from a challenge when something needed doing. Moving quickly now, spurred by the urgency of the situation and the rapidly disappearing sun, Jack secured Dusty to a sturdy juniper tree and gathered his equipment. He found his old battery-powered lantern and a length of strong rope. His hands shook slightly as he tied the rope around a large boulder and tested it with his full weight. It held firm. Taking a deep breath, Jack began his descent into the canyon, the rope burning slightly against his palms as he lowered himself down the rocky face. The climb took longer than he'd hoped. The rock was crumbly in places, and twice he had to find alternate routes when handholds proved unreliable. All the while, he could hear the creature below, its cries growing weaker, which worried him more than the climb itself. Finally, his boots touched down on the narrow ledge, and he was face to face with something that defied everything he thought he knew about the world. Up close, the being was even more extraordinary. The scales that covered its body were like nothing found in nature on Earth. Each one seemed to contain depth, as if they were tiny windows into some vast cosmic space. The creature was sitting awkwardly, one leg bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Dark fluid blood, Jack assumed, though it had a faint luminescent quality seeped from a gash on its shoulder. The amber eyes fixed on Jack with an intensity that was both frightening and strangely moving. "Easy now," Jack said softly, using the same gentle tone he employed with spooked horses. "I'm here to help. I don't know if you can understand me, but I'm going to get you out of here." To his amazement, the creature responded. Not with words, but with a gesture, a slow, deliberate nod of that alien head that conveyed understanding. The intelligence behind those eyes was unmistakable, and Jack felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cooling desert air. This wasn't some animal that had wandered into trouble. This was a person different, impossibly different, but a person nonetheless. The next hour tested every ounce of Jack's strength, ingenuity, and determination. Getting himself down to the ledge had been one thing. Getting both himself and an injured alien being back up to the canyon rim was another challenge entirely. The creature Jack had started thinking of it as her, for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, was surprisingly light despite her height. But the broken leg made movement excruciating for her. Every time Jack had to adjust his grip or shift their position, he could see pain flash across those reptilian features in a way that transcended species. Jack fashioned a makeshift harness using the rope and his belt, creating a system that would allow him to haul the alien up while she used her good leg to help push against the rock face. Communication was a challenge, but necessity proved to be the mother of invention. Through gestures, careful demonstrations, and what Jack could only describe as an intuitive understanding that seemed to flow between them, they worked out a plan. The ascent was grueling. Jack's muscles screamed in protest. His hands bled where the rope had torn through his calluses. And several times, he was certain they would both plummet to their deaths on the canyon floor far below. But inch by agonizing inch, they made progress. The alien bore the pain with a stoicism that Jack found humbling, never crying out even when Jack knew the movement must have been torture for her injured limbs. When they finally reached the top, both collapsed on the solid ground, breathing heavily. The stars had emerged in full force, painting the sky with a brilliance that was only possible in the desert, far from any city lights. Jack lay on his back, staring up at those countless points of light, and for the first time truly comprehended that this being beside him might have come from one of those distant suns. The thought made his head spin. After a few minutes of rest, Jack sat up and assessed their situation. The alien was in bad shape. The broken leg needed to be stabilized, and the wound on her shoulder required attention. His cabin was about 5 miles away, too far for her to walk even if her leg wasn't broken. Dusty could carry them both, but it would be slow going in the darkness. Jack made his decision quickly. Using strips torn from his spare shirt, he carefully splinted the alien's leg, working with the gentle precision he'd learned from years of tending to injured animals. The alien watched him work with those unblinking amber eyes, and Jack had the distinct impression that she was evaluating him, making judgments about his character based on his actions. He found himself wanting to measure up to whatever standards she might be applying. Once the leg was as secure as he could make it, Jack helped the alien onto Dusty's back, then climbed up behind her, holding her steady. The horse seemed remarkably calm given the strange passenger, as if animals possessed some wisdom about the fundamental sameness beneath superficial differences. The ride back to the cabin took nearly 2 hours. Jack kept Dusty to a careful walk, mindful of the injured passenger and the treacherous terrain in the darkness. The alien said nothing indeed. Jack hadn't heard her make a sound since he'd reached the ledge, but he could feel her presence, solid and undeniably real against him. His mind churned with questions. Where had she come from? How had she ended up trapped in that canyon? Were there others like her? And most pressingly, what should he do now? The rational thing would be to call someone the authorities, maybe, or the press, or scientists who might actually know how to deal with an extraterrestrial visitor. But something held Jack back from that line of thinking. He remembered all the movies he'd seen, all the stories about government cover-ups and aliens being dissected in secret facilities. Whether any of that was true or not, he found himself feeling protective of this strange being who had looked at him with such desperate hope in the canyon. She had trusted him to help her when she was vulnerable. He wouldn't betray that trust by treating her like a specimen to be studied or a threat to be contained. When they finally reached the cabin, Jack's arms were numb from holding the alien steady and his back ached from the tension. He carefully helped her down from Dusty and supported her weight as they made their way inside. The cabin was modest, just 2 rooms, really, with a wood stove, a simple kitchen area, a bed, and a worn armchair by a fireplace. Jack's few possessions, some books, a radio, photographs of his late parents gave the space a lived-in quality that spoke of solitary but not lonely existence. He settled the alien into his bed, the only comfortable place in the cabin, and she didn't protest. Up close, in the warm light of his oil lamps, Jack could see details he'd missed before. The scales weren't uniform in color patterns swirled across her skin like natural tattoos, and around her eyes were markings that might have been decorative or might have served some biological function. She wore no clothing in the human sense, but her body had natural armored plating in strategic areas that suggested modesty might be a universal concept, or perhaps just practical protection. Jack cleaned and bandaged the shoulder wound as best he could with his basic first aid supplies. The blood, if that's what it was, had a faint sweet smell, like copper mixed with something floral. It clotted quickly, which he took as a good sign. Through all of this, the alien remained still and watchful, those amber eyes following his every movement with an intensity that was both unnerving and oddly comforting. When Jack finally finished and stepped back, exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. He'd been running on adrenaline for hours, and now his body was demanding payment. He started to turn toward the armchair, intending to spend the night there, when something extraordinary happened. The alien reached out with one clawed hand and gently touched his arm. The contact sent a tingling sensation through Jack's skin, like a mild electrical current, but not unpleasant. Then, to his absolute shock, words formed in his mind, not spoken aloud, but somehow placed directly into his consciousness, clear as if someone had whispered in his ear. "Thank you, Jack Turner. Your kindness tonight has changed everything." Jack staggered backward, his heart racing. You can talk. I mean, not talk, but how do you know my name?" The alien's expression shifted into what might have been a smile, though on her reptilian features it was hard to be certain. More words appeared in his mind. "I know many things. Your species broadcasts much into the cosmos without realizing it. But more than your name, I know your heart. It is pure. It is good. That is why you stopped to help when others of your kind would have run in fear or sought to capture me for study." Jack sank into the armchair, his legs suddenly weak. "Who are you? Where are you from?" "I am called Zalara, in the closest approximation your language can manage. I come from a world you would call Kepler 442b, though we know it by another name. My people have been watching your planet for many generations. We do not usually make contact. There are protocols, agreements among the spacefaring civilizations about interference with developing worlds. But my ship malfunctioned. I crashed in your canyon 3 days ago. I thought I would die there." 3 days? Jack was horrified. "You were trapped there for 3 days?" "Yes. I had begun to accept that this would be my fate. Then you came. A poor man on an old horse, with nothing to gain and much to risk, and yet you helped. This says much about your character, Jack Turner. More than you might realize." Jack rubbed his face with his hands, trying to process everything. An alien, in his bed, from another planet, communicating telepathically. It was too much, and yet it was happening. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Do you have I don't know, people looking for you? A way to call for help?" Zalara's mental voice grew heavier with what Jack interpreted as concern. "Yes, my distress beacon activated when my ship crashed. By now, my people will have traced the signal. They will come. That is what worries me, Jack Turner." "Worries you? Why? Won't they just take you home?" "They will. But in doing so, they will see you. They will see that a human helped me. This will force a decision that was meant to wait another century, whether to reveal ourselves to your species. The council will debate. Some will advocate for continued observation. Others will argue that a debt has been incurred, that first contact is now inevitable. Your simple act of kindness tonight may have just accelerated your planet's entry into the galactic community by 100 of your years." Jack sat in stunned silence, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what he was hearing. He'd saved someone's life something he would have done for any creature in distress, and in doing so, he might have altered the course of human history. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was, in a strange way, the most important thing he'd ever done. I was just trying to help, he stammered. I know. That is precisely why it matters so much. Jack spent what remained of that night sitting in his armchair, watching Zalara rest while his mind spun with implications he couldn't fully grasp. Every few minutes, he would glance at her, half expecting to find that she'd vanished, that this had all been some elaborate dream brought on by too much sun and too little water. But she remained solid and real, her chest rising and falling with breath, those scales catching the lamplight in a way that was almost hypnotic. As dawn approached, Jack made coffee on his old stove, the familiar ritual helping to ground him in some semblance of normalcy. The smell of brewing coffee filled the small cabin, and to his surprise, Zalara stirred, her eyes opening to focus on him with renewed alertness. That scent, her voice echoed in his mind. It is pleasant. A stimulant beverage, yes? Your species seems quite fond of such things. Coffee, Jack confirmed, pouring himself a cup. I don't suppose you can drink it? My biology is different from yours, but not incompatible. We evolved in similar conditions: oxygen atmosphere, carbon-based chemistry, liquid water. I could likely consume many of your foods without issue. Though they would taste strange to me as yours would lack certain chemical compounds my senses are adapted to detect. Jack poured a second cup and approached the bed carefully, offering it to her. Zalara took it with surprising dexterity, despite her clawed fingers, bringing it to her face and inhaling deeply before taking a small sip. Something like pleasure flickered across her features. Interesting. Bitter, but with complex undertones. My people would find this agreeable. They sat in companionable silence for a while, human and alien sharing coffee, as the sun began to paint the eastern sky with shades of pink and gold. It was such a mundane moment, yet so profoundly strange, that Jack felt a laugh bubble up in his chest, not from humor, but from the sheer absurdity and wonder of it all. When will they come? He asked finally. Your people? Zalara set down the coffee cup with careful precision. Soon, perhaps today. The beacon's signal travels faster than light through folded space. The response will not be immediate, but neither will it be long delayed. They will send a diplomatic vessel first smaller than a full exploration ship, but impressive nonetheless to your eyes. What should I do? Jack found himself asking. Should I call someone? The government? The military? That is your choice, Jack Turner, but consider carefully. If your authorities arrive before my people do, they will attempt to take me. They will have many questions, and not all will be asked gently. Your government has protocols for such situations, even if they've never actually faced them. I would become property, a subject for study, and you would be swept up in it as well, questioned, possibly detained, your life irrevocably changed. Jack thought about this, sipping his coffee. And if we wait for your people? Then first contact happens on more equal terms. My people will not want to create an incident. They will be diplomatic, careful. Yes, your world will change. That is now inevitable, but it will change in a more controlled way. And you, Jack Turner, will be remembered not as the man who turned in an alien to his government, but as the man who showed kindness to a stranger from the stars. That legacy means something in the galactic community. The weight of the decision pressed down on Jack's shoulders. He was a simple cowboy who spent his whole life worrying about mundane things like fixing fences and whether he could afford new boots. Now, he was being asked to make a choice that could affect all of humanity's future. It seemed cosmically unfair. But as he looked at Zalara, at the trust evident in those amber eyes, he realized the decision wasn't actually that difficult. He'd made it the moment he'd started climbing down into that canyon to help her. Everything since had just been following that initial choice to its logical conclusion. "We wait," he said firmly. "We wait for your people." Relief flooded through Zilar's mental voice. "Thank you. You honor not just me, but the principles that bind all civilized species together. Compassion, trust, mutual respect. These things transcend biology, Jack Turner. They are what separate people from monsters, regardless of how many legs they walk on or what color their skin might be." The morning passed in a strange domesticity. Jack made breakfast eggs and toast and was surprised to find Zilara could eat it without difficulty, though she commented mentally that the chicken embryos were far richer than anything similar on her world. He cared for Dusty and his neighbor's cattle, moving through his routine chores while his mind processed the reality that today might be the day humanity learned it wasn't alone in the universe. It was just past noon when Zilara suddenly tensed, her head tilting in a way that reminded Jack of how Dusty would react to distant sounds beyond human hearing. "They're here," she said into his mind, her mental voice tight with emotion. "The ship has entered your atmosphere. They will be here within minutes. Jack, I must prepare you. What you are about to see will be beyond anything your species has witnessed. Try not to be afraid." Jack stepped outside, shading his eyes against the brilliant desert sun. At first, he saw nothing unusual, just the endless blue sky and the distant mesas shimmering in the heat. Then he noticed that the birds had gone silent. Even the winds seemed to have paused, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. The sky began to change. At first, Jack thought it might be a cloud formation, but no cloud moved like this. A section of the blue heaven began to shimmer and ripple like heat waves over asphalt. And then suddenly there was something there, something that had either just appeared or uncloaked itself from invisibility. The ship was enormous, easily the size of 3 or 4 houses, and shaped unlike any aircraft Jack had ever seen. It wasn't sleek like a jet or blocky like a helicopter. Instead, it seemed organic, all flowing curves and surfaces that caught the light in ways that hurt to look at directly. The hull appeared to be made of some material that was simultaneously metallic and crystalline, shifting between states in a way that Jack's eyes couldn't quite track. Symbols glowed along its surface in patterns that might have been writing or might have been purely decorative. Jack couldn't tell. But the ship, impressive as it was, wasn't what made Jack's breath catch in his throat. It was what came after. As he stood there, frozen in awe, the sky around the vessel began to light up with more arrivals. Dozens of them at first, then hundreds, each ship different from the others. Some were small, barely larger than cars. Others dwarfed even the first vessel, massive constructions that seemed to defy the laws of physics simply by existing. They came in every conceivable shape: spheres, cylinders, things with too many angles to count. Structures that seemed to fold through dimensions Jack's mind couldn't quite comprehend. And then came the beings. The ships began to open, and Jack realized he was witnessing something that no human had seen before. Representatives from civilizations scattered across the galaxy, all coming to bear witness to this moment. They emerged into the air, some flying through means Jack couldn't discern, others descending on beams of light, still others simply appearing at ground level as if teleported. Jack sank to his knees, not from fear, but from the overwhelming grandeur of what he was witnessing. There were beings of pure light that hurt to look at directly, creatures that seemed to be made of living crystal, faceted bodies reflecting the sunlight in prismatic cascades. Things that floated like jellyfish, but with geometries that suggested terrifying intelligence. Bipedal beings that almost looked human until you noticed the extra joints or the way their heads moved on necks too flexible. There were entities that seemed to phase in and out of visibility, existing partially in dimensions Jack couldn't perceive. Some were towering giants, others no larger than his hand. The diversity was staggering, mind-breaking in its implications. This was the galaxy. Jack realized with a clarity that bordered on religious epiphany. This vast, teeming abundance of life, all of it intelligent, all of it with its own histories and dreams and stories. And humanity, alone on its little blue world, had known nothing of this magnificent cosmic community that had been there all along, just beyond the veil of distance and technology. Behind Jack, he heard the cabin door open. Zalara emerged, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch Jack had fashioned earlier. Her broken leg still splinted, but her bearing proud despite the injury. She moved to stand beside Jack, and he felt her hand, those scaled, clawed fingers that had seemed so alien just hours ago, rest gently on his shoulder. "Do not be afraid," she said into his mind, her mental voice filled with warmth. "Yes, this is overwhelming. Yes, your world is about to change in ways you cannot imagine. But look at them, Jack Turner. Really look. See the diversity, yes, but also see something else." Jack tore his eyes from the assembled multitude to glance at Zalara. "What am I supposed to see?" "That for all our differences, we are here for the same reason. We came because one of our own was in need. We came because word spread that a human had helped her without asking for reward or recognition. We came because kindness, it turns out, is the universal language that binds all thinking beings together. Every species represented here has a story of how they earned their place in this community. Now, thanks to you, humanity has begun to write its own." The being that approached them first was unlike anything Jack could have imagined. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be made of interlocking plates of what looked like living metal, each piece moving independently yet in perfect harmony. Its face, if it could be called that, was a smooth oval surface that occasionally rippled with colors and patterns that Jack somehow understood were expressions, though he couldn't explain how he knew. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a deep resonance that Jack felt in his bones as much as heard with his ears. "I am Speaker Vorath of the Collective of Aligned Worlds," the being announced, and this time the communication wasn't telepathic like Zalara. Yes, but somehow translated directly into English in a way that made Jack's head hurt to contemplate. "We are the governing body that maintains peace and cooperation among the spacefaring civilizations of this galactic sector. Jack Turner of Earth, we have come to witness you and to understand what has transpired here." Jack found his voice, though it came out shakier than he would have liked. I didn't do anything special. She was hurt. Anyone would have helped." A ripple of something passed through the assembled beings. Not sound exactly, but a reaction nonetheless. Speaker Vorath's surface shimmered with what might have been colors indicating surprise or perhaps approval. "That statement itself is telling, Jack Turner. You truly believe what you say, which makes it all the more remarkable. You must understand help between species is not as common as you might think. Fear of the unknown, concern about contamination or cultural interference, simple xenophobia, these things exist across the cosmos, not just on your world." When Zalara's distress beacon was received, it included something unusual, video footage from her suit of view descending that cliff face to help her, even after clearly seeing that she was not of your species. That footage has been broadcast to thousands of worlds in the past hours. Jack felt his face flush. "There's video?" Zalara's mental voice was apologetic. "My suit records everything for safety purposes. I did not think to mention it." "I am sorry," Speaker Vorath continued, the patterns on its face shifting in what Jack was beginning to recognize as a form of smile. "What you did, Jack Turner, has sparked a debate that has raged through our collective for eons. There are species who believe primitive worlds like yours should be left in isolation until you develop faster-than-light travel on your own. They argue that early contact disrupts natural development and creates dependencies. Others believe that any species capable of moral reasoning deserves a place at the table, regardless of technological advancement. You have become the center of this debate, whether you wished it or not." Jack's mind reeled. "I don't understand. What does my helping Zalara have to do with politics?" A new voice joined the conversation, this one distinctly feminine and seeming to come from a being of pure light that had drifted closer. "Because you represent a data point that cannot be ignored," the light being said, its voice like wind chimes in a breeze. Statistical analysis of first contact scenarios across galactic history shows that species with high rates of intraspecies cooperation and cross-species compassion tend to become peaceful, productive members of the galactic community. Those that lack these traits do not. Your actions suggest that humanity, despite its many current conflicts, possesses the fundamental capacity for the kind of empathy that bridges the gap between different forms of life. "But I'm just one person," Jack protested. "You can judge all of humanity based on what one cowboy did in the middle of nowhere. Can we not?" Speaker Vorath's surface rippled thoughtfully. "Tell me, Jack Turner, if this situation were reversed, if you were injured and trapped, and it was Zalara who found you, knowing nothing of your species, would she have helped?" Jack looked at Zalara, remembering the trust in her eyes, the patience with which she'd endured pain during their escape from the canyon, the gratitude in her mental voice. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Yes, she would have." "And there," Speaker Vorath said with what was definitely satisfaction, "is the heart of the matter. The recognition of basic decency across species lines. The assumption of goodwill toward intelligent beings, regardless of form. These are the traits that matter, Jack Turner. These are what we look for." For the next several hours, Jack found himself at the center of what could only be described as the most important conversation in human history, except that no other humans were present to witness it. Beings from across the galaxy asked him questions about Earth, about humanity, about his own life and choices. They wanted to know about human culture, conflicts, hopes, and fears. Jack, who had never even finished high school, who had spent his life working with his hands in obscurity, found himself trying to represent an entire species to the cosmic community. He did his best to be honest. He told them about human achievements, art, music, literature, acts of great courage and compassion. But he also didn't hide the darker aspects, the wars, the prejudices, the environmental destruction, the vast inequalities. He figured if they were going to judge humanity, they should judge based on the whole truth, not a sanitized version. "We are not perfect," Jack said at one point, addressing what seemed to be a council of representatives from various worlds. "We fight among ourselves. We make terrible mistakes. We can be cruel and short-sighted. But we're also capable of incredible kindness, of changing, of learning from our mistakes, of reaching out across divides to help people who are different from us. I hope ... I hope that counts for something." "It counts for everything," said a being that resembled an ambulatory tree, its voice like rustling leaves. "Perfection is not what we seek, Jack Turner. Perfection is stagnation. It is the capacity for growth that matters. The question before us now is not whether humanity deserves contact. Your actions have answered that question definitively. The question is how to proceed in a way that gives your species the best chance of thriving as it enters this larger community." "What does that mean, exactly?" Jack asked, a knot of worry forming in his stomach. "What happens to Earth now?" Speaker Vorath's surface rippled with complex patterns. "That remains to be decided. There are protocols for situations like this, though I confess they are rarely invoked. Typically, first contact is either accidental and traumatic or carefully planned over decades. This ... this is different. A genuine act of compassion, creating a debt that must be honored, captured on video that has already been seen by billions of beings across the galaxy. Public opinion across the collective heavily favors immediate open contact, but there are legitimate concerns about the disruptive effects on human society." Zalara, who had been quiet for much of this discussion, suddenly projected her thoughts with force enough that everyone present could hear. "Then let me make a suggestion. Give them time, but not isolation. Let Jack Turner be the bridge. Teach him, prepare him, Then let him return to his people with proof of what lies beyond their small world. Let humanity have a guide who is one of their own, who can help them understand the magnitude of what awaits them while preparing them for it. It will not be immediate contact, but neither will it be complete denial. It will be a beginning. The assembled beings fell silent, considering this. Jack's heart pounded. Wait, you want me to what? I don't have the education or the knowledge or the anything to be some kind of ambassador for humanity. You have something more important than education, Jack Turner. Zalara's mental voice was firm. You have wisdom. You have compassion. You have the ability to see the person beyond the surface differences. These qualities cannot be taught in schools. They are forged through experience and choice. You have proven you possess them. That makes you more qualified than any of your world's politicians or academics could ever be. She speaks truth, agreed the light being. We could provide you with knowledge information about the galaxy, its species, its history. We could give you technology that would prove beyond doubt that this contact is real. But more importantly, we could teach you how to help your species navigate the psychological and social upheaval that open contact will bring. You would not be alone in this, Jack Turner. You would have guides, teachers, support from across the collective. Jack felt the weight of every eye or sensory organ approximating eyes upon him. This was insane. This was impossible. He was a poor cowboy who lived in a 2-room cabin and worried about affording truck tires. How had his life gone from that mundane reality to this cosmic crossroads in less than 24 hours? But then he thought about what would happen if he said no. The collective would make their decision without human input. Maybe they'd withdraw completely, leaving Earth in isolation for another century while humanity tore itself apart with wars. An environmental catastrophe, never knowing that help and fellowship existed just beyond reach. Or maybe they'd make contact anyway, but through official government channels. And Jack had seen enough movies to know how that usually went peg. Military posturing, fear-mongering, and quite possibly violence born of misunderstanding. If I do this, Jack said slowly, if I agree to be this bridge you're talking about, I have conditions. Speaker Vorth's surface brightened with what might have been respect. Name them. First, I need to know that you're not going to experiment on people, or abduct anyone, or do any of the scary stuff from UFO stories. If we're going to have a relationship with you all, it needs to be based on respect and consent. Agreed absolutely, Speaker Vorth said immediately. Such actions are violations of collective law, and have been for millennia. Any species engaging in such behavior would be sanctioned severely. Second, Jack continued, gaining confidence. When the time comes for open contact, it needs to happen in a way that doesn't favor one nation or group over others. I won't be a tool for making America or any other country more powerful than the rest. This affects all of humanity equally. A wise stipulation, the tree being murmured. It shall be honored. Third, I need help taking care of Dusty, my horse, Jack clarified, seeing confusion ripple through some of the assembled beings. I can't just disappear and leave him without food or someone to look after him. And Mr. Morrison at the ranch, he's counting on me to help with the cattle. I can't just abandon my responsibilities. For a moment, there was silence. Then something wonderful happened. Laughter. Not mocking laughter, but genuine amusement and what seemed like affection. It came in different forms from different species, chiming sounds, rippling colors, vibrations in the air, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. Jack Turner, Speaker Vorth said, and there was warmth in that resonant voice. Here we discuss the fate of your entire species, and you worry about your horse and your employer. This is precisely why you are the right choice. You have not lost sight of your immediate moral obligations in the face of cosmic grandeur. Yes, arrangements will be made for Dusty and for Mr. Morrison. We can provide compensation that will seem to come from conventional sources so as not to raise questions. Then I guess ... Quote Jack took a deep breath. I guess I'm in. God help me. I'm in. The response from the assembled beings was immediate and overwhelming. Colors flashed, sounds harmonized, and Jack felt a wave of something: approval, welcome, joy wash over him from 100 different species, all expressing the same sentiment in their own unique ways. It was beautiful and terrifying and unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Then it is decided, Speaker Varth announced formally. Jack Turner of Earth will serve as humanity's first unofficial ambassador to the collective of aligned worlds. He will be educated in our ways, provided with proof and tools to eventually share with his species, and prepared for the day when Earth is ready to take its place among the stars. This is a historic moment, one that will be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. As the formal declaration ended, the gathered beings began to disperse, returning to their ships with purposes Jack could only imagine. But Zilara remained, and Speaker Varth approached them both with deliberate care. Your education begins now, Jack Turner, the speaker said. But first there is the matter of Zilara's healing. Our medical technology far exceeds your own. Within hours, her injuries will be fully repaired. You saved her life in that canyon, but more than that, you saved her dignity, her hope. That debt is not easily repaid. Zilara projected her thoughts with intensity. I would like to request assignment as Jack Turner's primary guide and teacher. I owe him a life debt, but beyond that, I believe we have formed a connection that will aid in his education. He trusts me, and trust is the foundation of all learning. An excellent suggestion, Speaker Varth agreed. It is approved. Zilara will remain on Earth with Jack Turner, her presence cloaked from detection by your species' primitive sensors. She will be his teacher, guide, and friend as he learns what he needs to know. Jack looked at Zilara, this being who had been a complete stranger just yesterday, an impossible creature from beyond the stars. Now she felt like... What? A friend seemed too simple a word. A companion on a journey neither of them had expected to take. I'd like that, he said simply. I'd like that a lot. The following weeks were the most intense educational experience of Jack's life. Zilara, her injuries healed within hours by technology that seemed like magic to Jack's eyes, became his constant companion and teacher. They remained at his cabin, which the collective had somehow shielded from detection satellites, and aircraft would simply fail to notice the area, their sensors skipping over it as if it were a blank spot on the map. Each day brought new revelations. Zilara taught him about the galaxy's structure, about the thousands of intelligent species that called it home, about the complex web of alliances, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges that bound the collective together. She showed him holographic records of worlds. He could barely imagine planets with crystalline forests where trees sang in the solar wind. Ocean worlds where entire civilizations lived in massive underwater cities, artificial habitats, constructed around dying stars to capture every last bit of energy. But more than facts and figures, Zilara taught Jack about perspective. She helped him understand that humanity's problems, which seemed so overwhelming when you were in the middle of them, were actually quite common growing pains that most species experienced. Wars, environmental damage, social inequality, these were challenges that nearly every civilization faced during their adolescent phase. Some overcame them and matured into peaceful, sustainable societies. Others did not, and those species rarely survived to reach the stars. The question facing humanity, Zilara told him one evening as they sat outside the cabin watching the stars, is not whether you have problems. All young species do. The question is whether you have the wisdom to solve them, or whether you will let them destroy you. My people faced similar challenges once. We nearly wiped ourselves out in a war over resources and ideology. It was only when we learned to see beyond our differences, to recognize that our commonalities were more important than our conflicts, that we survived. The galaxy is full of ruins left by species that failed to learn that lesson. So what saved your people? Jack asked. What made the difference? Zilara was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes reflecting the starlight. Individuals like you, she finally said. People who chose compassion over fear, who reached across divides even when it was difficult or dangerous. Not governments or grand political movements, though those played their part. It was individuals making small choices to help others, to see the person beyond the surface. Those small choices accumulated, created examples that inspired others, until eventually they reached a critical mass that changed society itself. You think what you did in that canyon was small, Jack Turner. But small acts of kindness are the seeds from which civilizations grow. 3 months into his education, Jack was awakened one night by Zilara's urgent mental voice. Jack, wake up. Something is happening. Something significant. He bolted upright, heart racing. What? What's wrong? Nothing is wrong, but you need to see this. Come outside, now. Jack pulled on his boots and jacket and stumbled outside into the cold desert night. The sky was ablaze with light, not the natural starlight he'd grown accustomed to, but something else. Streams of luminescence arced across the heavens like auroras, but in colors that didn't exist in nature. Violet bleeding into shades Jack didn't have names for. Geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with meaning. What is that? He breathed. Messages, Zilara explained, standing beside him, her scales reflecting the alien light show. The collective is in communication. Something major is being decided. Look there. She gestured with one clawed hand toward the eastern horizon, where the patterns seemed to converge and intensify. That's a vote being tallied. Every member species of the collective is weighing in on something, their decisions being broadcast and aggregated in real time across light years of space. A vote on what? On you, Jack Turner. On Earth. The question has been raised formally. Should Earth be granted provisional membership in the collective of aligned worlds, with you as its representative until such time as open contact can be made with your entire species? The implications hit Jack like a physical blow. But we're not ready. I'm not ready. I've only been learning for 3 months. And in those 3 months, you have proven yourself worthy 100 times over. The reports from my superiors, the observations from the stealth monitoring that has been ongoing, all of it paints a picture of a human who has taken this responsibility with utmost seriousness. You study late into every night. You ask penetrating questions. You think deeply about how to present what you're learning in ways your species will understand. You have not let this power or knowledge corrupt you. You still care for Dusty, still maintain your relationships. With Mr. Morrison and the other ranch workers, still live simply, despite having access to technology that could make you wealthy beyond measure. That kind of character is rare, Jack Turner. It is precious. The light show continued for hours, and Jack watched in awe as the fate of his entire species was debated across the stars. He thought about everyone he'd ever known, his parents gone now, but who had taught him to be kind and honest. Mr. Morrison and the other ranch workers who treated him with respect despite his poverty. Even people he'd never met, the billions of humans going about their lives completely unaware that this moment was happening. Finally, as dawn began to paint the eastern sky with natural colors, the alien lights began to fade. The patterns coalesced into a single point of brilliant illumination directly overhead, then flashed once with an intensity that briefly rivaled the rising sun before disappearing entirely. It is decided, Zilara said quietly. The vote was nearly unanimous. Earth has been granted provisional membership in the collective of aligned worlds, with you as its representative. You are now, officially, humanity's ambassador to the galaxy. Jack Turner, the first human to hold such a position. The weight of 6 billion souls rests on your shoulders. Jack's legs gave out and he sat down hard on the cold ground. I can't. This is too much. I'm not smart enough, not educated enough, not anything enough for this. Zalara settled beside him, her presence solid and comforting. You are exactly enough, precisely because you understand the magnitude of what you have been given and do not take it lightly. Now comes the hardest part, Jack. Now you must begin to prepare for the day when you return to your species and tell them everything. You must craft a message that will inspire hope rather than fear, that will unite rather than divide, that will help humanity reach for its potential rather than destroy itself in panic. When? Jack asked. When do I have to do this? The collective has agreed to give you time 1 of your years from now. That gives you time to learn, to prepare, to gather the evidence and tools you'll need to prove what you're saying. And it gives your species a bit more time to mature. Even 1 year can make a difference for a civilization in transition. 1 year. Jack had 1 year to become what humanity needed him to be. The thought was overwhelming, but as he sat there in the dawn light with his alien friend beside him, he felt something else too. Determination. He'd made a choice when he climbed down into that canyon to help a stranger. Now he had to see that choice through to its conclusion, no matter how terrifying the path ahead might be. The following months were the most challenging of Jack's life. His education intensified as Zalara and other representatives from the collective worked to prepare him for the task ahead. He learned about xenopsychology, the study of how different species think and perceive reality. He studied galactic history, understanding the patterns that had led to successful first contacts and catastrophic failures. He was taught how to use translation devices that could make him understood in any human language, and recording technology that could document his experiences in ways that would be undeniable proof of extraterrestrial contact. But perhaps most importantly, he learned how to tell a story. The collective understood something profound. Facts alone would not convince humanity. People needed narrative, emotion, context. They needed to understand not just that aliens existed, but what that existence meant for humanity's place in the cosmos. Your species responds strongly to stories, explained a being named Curator Thel, whose form seemed to shift between states like liquid mercury held together by invisible forces. They use stories to make sense of the world, to transmit values, to inspire action. Your religions, your histories, your entertainment, all stories. So you must become a storyteller, Jack Turner. You must learn to frame the truth in ways that resonate with human psychology. Jack practiced endlessly, refining his message. He recorded video after video, trying different approaches, getting feedback from Zalara and other collective members who had studied human culture. Some attempts were too clinical and factual, failing to capture the emotional weight of the moment. Others were too grandiose, making promises that couldn't be kept or painting pictures that were too idealistic. Slowly, painfully, he found his voice honest, humble, hopeful, but realistic. He also prepared the evidence. The collective provided him with artifacts that would prove beyond doubt that he had contact with alien civilizations, materials with properties that could exist according to human physics, devices that performed functions human technology couldn't replicate, biological samples from Zalara herself that would boggle geneticists. But more than physical proof, they gave him something else: coordinates. When the time comes, Speaker Varth told him during one of their sessions, you will give your species a gift. The coordinates to a collective listening post just beyond your Kuiper belt in the outer reaches of your solar system. It is unmanned, automated, designed specifically for civilizations like yours who are on the cusp of joining the greater community. Humanity can send probes, eventually crewed missions, to verify its existence. It will serve as concrete proof that you are not delusional or perpetrating an elaborate hoax. And it will give your species a goal, something to reach for, that will unite your nations in common purpose. As the year progressed, Jack found himself changing in ways he couldn't quite articulate. The simple cowboy who had ridden into Copper Canyon that fateful evening had been transformed by knowledge and responsibility into something more. He hadn't lost his essential self. He was still Jack Turner, still cared about the same things, still lived modestly and treated everyone with respect. But he had been stretched. His perspective expanded to encompass scales of time and space the human language barely had words for. He thought often about how to explain this transformation to his fellow humans. How do you describe the feeling of understanding your place in a universe teeming with life? How do you convey the humility of realizing that humanity was not the center of creation, while simultaneously communicating the profound importance of every individual choice? These questions kept him awake many nights, staring at the stars that now held names and stories he'd learned firsthand. As the one-year mark approached, preparations intensified. The collective made arrangements for the grand revelation, not a massive landing on the White House lawn or the UN building, but something more in keeping with Jack's nature and the story of how this had all begun. They would return to Copper Canyon, to the exact spot where Jack had saved Zilara, and from there he would broadcast his message to the world. Your journey began with an act of compassion in this place. Let humanity's journey into the galactic community begin here as well. It creates a narrative symmetry that will resonate with human psychology. Jack looked down at the ledge where he'd first encountered Zilara, remembering the fear and wonder of that moment. "Do you think they'll believe me?" he asked quietly. "Even with all the evidence, all the proof, do you think people will accept that this is real?" "Some will believe immediately. Others will never believe, no matter how much evidence you provide. Most will be somewhere in between, wanting to believe but afraid of the implications. That's normal, Jack. That's how change always works, slowly, with resistance, with people moving at different speeds. But you're not responsible for convincing everyone. You're only responsible for telling the truth and providing the tools for those who are willing to see it. The rest will unfold as it must." The night before the broadcast, Jack couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, the same bed where Zilara had recovered from her injuries a year ago, and thought about everyone he'd ever known. His mind wandered to childhood friends, to his late parents who had never finished school but had taught him everything that really mattered about being a good person, to Mr. Morrison, who had given him steady work when others saw only a poor drifter. He thought about all the strangers out there in the world who would wake up tomorrow to news that would change everything they thought they knew about reality. "You're afraid," Zalara's voice drifted into his mind. She was outside, keeping watch as she often did, but her thoughts reached him easily now after months of practice with telepathic communication. "Terrified," Jack admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I say the wrong thing and it causes panic? What if, Jack Turner." Zalara's mental voice was firm but kind. "You have spent a year preparing for this moment. You have been taught by the greatest teachers in the galaxy. You have practiced until your message is perfect. But more importantly, you have not changed who you are at your core. Tomorrow, you will stand before your species and speak not as some grand ambassador or cosmic authority, but as Jack Turner, a simple man who helped someone in need and was changed by it. That authenticity is your greatest strength. Trust it. Trust yourself." Jack took a deep breath, then another. She was right. He'd done everything he could to prepare. Now he just had to have faith in himself and humanity's ability to rise to this challenge, and in the fundamental goodness that had started this whole journey with one choice: to climb down into a canyon and help a stranger. Tomorrow, he would tell the world about the universe they'd been living in without knowing it. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, Jack Turner allowed himself one last peaceful moment as the simple cowboy he'd always been, looking at stars that would never seem the same again. The morning of the broadcast dawned clear and cold, the desert air crisp with the promise of a day unlike any other in human history. Jack dressed carefully in his usual worn jeans and denim shirt. Solara had advised him to appear as he normally did, to embody the everyman quality that made him relatable. Representatives from the collective had arrived during the night, their ships cloaked but present, ready to provide support and, if necessary, protection. The broadcast equipment was unlike anything human technology could produce, devices no larger than a coin that would hijack every communication system on Earth simultaneously, translating Jack as words into every language in real time, while preventing any government or organization from blocking the signal. It was, by necessity, a forceful entry into human consciousness, but the collective had determined it was the only way to ensure everyone heard the message directly rather than filtered through institutions that might distort or suppress it. Jack stood at the canyon's edge, the very spot where he'd first seen Solara on that fateful evening a year ago. The morning sun cast long shadows across the red rock formations, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out, oblivious to the cosmic significance of the moment. Behind Jack, visible in the frame that would be broadcast to billions, stood Solara, and 3 other representatives from different species, a carefully chosen selection designed to show the diversity of life in the galaxy without being overwhelming. Speaker Vorath's voice resonated in Jack's mind and in the air around them. "It is time, Jack Turner. All systems are ready. When you are prepared, simply begin speaking. The technology will handle everything else." Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. His mouth was dry despite drinking water moments before. This was it, the moment that would define not just his life, but potentially the entire trajectory of human civilization. He thought about all the speeches he'd practiced, all the carefully crafted words he'd memorized. Then he looked at Solara, who gave him what he'd learned to recognize as an encouraging smile, and he made a decision. He would speak from the heart. Jack took a deep breath and began. "My name is Jack Turner. I'm a cowboy from New Mexico, and a year ago, I was nobody special. I worked on a ranch, took care of cattle that didn't belong to me, and lived in a 2-room cabin that leaked when it rained. I was poor, uneducated by most standards, and unknown. If you'd asked me then what I thought I'd be doing with my life, I would have told you I'd probably die the same way I'd lived, quietly, obscurely, leaving barely a ripple on the world. I was okay with that. It was an honest life, and I tried to live it well." He paused, gathering his thoughts, aware that across the globe, people were stopping what they were doing, pulled by the strange compulsion of the broadcast to pay attention to this ordinary-looking man speaking from a canyon in the American Southwest. "A year ago, I went for an evening ride through Copper Canyon. Right here behind me, I heard someone crying for help. What I found changed everything, not just for me, but potentially for every person alive on this planet. I found her." Jack gestured to Solara, who stepped forward into clear view. Across the world, Jack knew, people were gasping, screaming, fainting, staring in shock at the undeniably real alien being on their screens. "Her name is Solara. She's from a planet 1,200 light-years from Earth. Her ship malfunctioned, and she was trapped on a ledge in this canyon, injured and alone. When I found her, I had a choice to make, the same choice any of you might have faced in similar circumstances. I could have run away in fear. I could have called the authorities and let them handle it. Or I could help someone who needed help, regardless of how different they looked from me. I chose to help. It took hours to get her out of that canyon. It was hard, dangerous work, and I didn't know what would happen afterward. But it was the right thing to do." Jack's voice grew stronger as he continued, the nervousness fading as he focused on simply telling his story. "What I didn't know was that in making that choice, I'd started something much bigger than myself. Solara's people came looking for her, but they didn't come alone. They came with representatives from across the galaxy, hundreds of intelligent species that exist out there among the stars, living their lives, building their civilizations, and wondering if we down here on Earth would ever be ready to join them. The camera pulled back slightly, showing the other alien representatives more clearly, each one radically different from the others, a visual testament to the diversity of life in the universe. For the past year, I've been learning about the galaxy we live in. I've been educated by beings whose civilizations are millions of years older than ours. I've seen things that I don't have words to properly describe. And I've been given a responsibility I never asked for, but will do my best to fulfill, to be humanity's first representative to something called the Collective of Aligned Worlds. It's like a cosmic United Nations where species work together, share knowledge, maintain peace, and help each other grow. Jack paused, knowing this next part was crucial. I know what many of you are thinking right now. You're scared. You think this might be an invasion, or a trick, or the end of the world as we know it. Some of you are convinced I'm crazy, or that this is all some elaborate hoax. I understand those reactions. They're natural. But I need you to listen to what I'm about to tell you, because it's the most important thing I'll ever say. He stepped closer to the camera, his weathered face filling the frame, every line and scar visible, the face of a man who'd lived hard and honest, who had no reason to lie. This isn't an invasion. The Collective doesn't want it to conquer Earth or steal our resources or enslave humanity. They've been watching us for a long time, waiting to see if we developed the capacity to join them peacefully. What I did in this canyon, helping someone different from me without expecting anything in return, that is the kind of behavior they've been looking for. Not because they think humans are special or chosen, but because it shows we might be capable of getting along with species vastly different from ourselves. And that's the minimum requirement for joining the galactic community. Jack's voice grew more passionate. But here's the thing, the Collective won't save us from ourselves. They won't solve our problems or fix our world. That's not how it works. Every species has to prove they can overcome their own challenges before they're truly ready for contact. The wars, the poverty, the environmental destruction, all the ways we hurt each other and our planet, we have to fix those things ourselves. What the Collective offers isn't salvation. It's fellowship, knowledge, a place in a larger community. But we have to earn that place by becoming the kind of species worthy of it. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. I've been given proof, undeniable, scientific proof, that what I'm telling you is real. Over the next hours and days, that evidence will be made available to scientists worldwide. Materials that couldn't exist according to our current physics. Technology that performs functions we haven't achieved. Biological samples that will revolutionize our understanding of life itself. And most importantly, coordinates to a collective listening post in our own solar system that we can visit, that we can verify with our own eyes and instruments. Jack's expression softened. I know this is overwhelming. I know your world has been turned upside down in the last few minutes. But I also know something else. Humans are capable of incredible things when we work together. We've overcome challenges before that seemed impossible. We've reached across divides that seemed unbridgeable. We've created art and music and literature that moves the soul. We've shown compassion and courage in the face of terrible odds. All of that matters. All of that counts toward the kind of species we can become. He glanced back at Zilara, who nodded encouragement. The Collective is giving us a gift time. They're not demanding immediate change or imposing their will on us. They're offering knowledge, guidance, and patience while we figure out how to be better versions of ourselves. But that work, the hard work of becoming a species worthy of the stars, that's on us. All of us. Every choice we make from this moment forward about how we treat each other, how we care for our planet, how we face our differences, all of it matters now in a way it never did before. Jack's voice dropped, becoming more intimate, as if speaking directly to each individual watching. I'm not a president or a scientist or a philosopher. I'm just a cowboy who made a choice to help someone in need. But that choice rippled outward in ways I never imagined. And now I'm asking each of you to make similar choices. Be kind to people who are different from you. Look for the person behind the surface. Work towards solutions instead of conflicts. Care for the planet that gave us life. These aren't new ideas. They're things we've always known we should do. The difference is that now we have a reason beyond our own survival. Now we have the stars to reach for. He smiled then, a genuine expression of hope mixed with determination. Humanity's childhood is over. We've just learned we live in a neighborhood full of other families, other stories, other dreams. It's scary and exciting and overwhelming all at once. But I have to believe that we're capable of rising to this challenge. That we can become the kind of species the galaxy will be proud to call neighbors. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But nothing worthwhile ever is. Jack raised his hand in a simple wave. My name is Jack Turner. A year ago, I was nobody. Today, I'm humanity's first ambassador to the stars. But tomorrow, each of you will have to decide what role you will all play in the story we're all writing together. The universe is watching. Let's show them what humanity is capable of when we're at our best. Thank you for listening. The broadcast ended, but the signal remained active for several more minutes, showing the alien representatives more clearly, allowing humanity to truly see and process what had just been revealed. Then, gradually, the hijacked communication systems released their grip, returning to normal function as screens around the world went dark or returned to regular programming. Jack slumped against a nearby rock, suddenly exhausted. Is it done? Did it work? Speaker Vorath approached, its metallic surface rippling with colors Jack had learned indicated satisfaction. It is done. The message has been received by 97.3% of Earth's population. Initial response monitoring shows the expected range of reactions: fear, denial, excitement, anger. But beneath all of that, we detect something crucial: hope. You gave them hope, Jack Turner. You showed them that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That is a powerful message. Zalara settled beside Jack, her presence comforting after a year of companionship. You were magnificent. You spoke not as someone trying to impress them or control them, but as one of them. That authenticity will resonate far more than any polished political speech could have. What happens now? Jack asked, watching the sky where more ships were beginning to decloak, becoming visible to human observation for the first time. They hung there like impossible stars, a visible reminder that everything had changed. Now comes the hard part, Speaker Vorath said. Now humanity must process this revelation and decide what to do with it. There will be chaos, certainly. Governments will scramble to respond. Religious institutions will grapple with theological implications. Scientists will race to study the evidence you've provided. Some will embrace this new reality quickly. Others will resist it bitterly. This is natural, expected. Change on this scale never comes smoothly. And me? What do I do? You continue, Zalara answered. You remain available to your species, answering questions, providing guidance, serving as the bridge between human and alien understanding. You will be interviewed, studied, challenged. Your life will never be private or simple again. This is the burden you accepted when you agreed to this role. Jack nodded slowly, already seeing the weight of what lay ahead. I miss my quiet life already. I know. But that cowboy who rode into this canyon a year ago, he still exists inside you. He always will. You haven't lost yourself, Jack Turner. You've just become more than you were. That's what growth means. In the days following the broadcast, the world convulsed with reaction. As predicted, responses varied wildly. Many nations declared states of emergency. The United Nations called an emergency session that lasted 3 days straight. Religious leaders across all faiths issued statements ranging from welcoming to apocalyptic. Scientists ascended on the locations where Jack's evidence had been made available, beginning the long process of verification. But among ordinary people, something unexpected happened. Stories began to emerge, thousands of them at first. Then, millions of people performing acts of kindness inspired by Jack's message. A businessman in Tokyo donated his wealth to environmental causes. A group of teenagers in Sao Paulo organized a neighborhood cleanup. Enemies in a decades-long conflict in Africa agreed to peace talks, stating that human divisions seemed petty in light of galactic context. It wasn't universal, and it didn't solve the world's problems overnight, but it was a start. A spark of something better trying to catch fire. Jack watched these developments from his cabin, which had become a pilgrimage site for people wanting to meet the man who'd changed history. The collective provided security, invisible but present, to keep him safe, while still allowing him to interact with his fellow humans. He gave interviews to journalists from every major news organization on Earth, always delivering the same message. Kindness matters. Compassion bridges divides, and humanity's best chance for the future lies in choosing to be better than we've been. 3 months after the broadcast, a remarkable event occurred. The major spacefaring nations, previously competitors in a new space race, announced a joint mission to the coordinates Jack had provided. They would work together to reach the collective listening post, to verify its existence with their own eyes and instruments. It would take years to complete, but the announcement itself represented something unprecedented. Nations that had been rivals choosing cooperation over competition because the alternative was being left behind, while others joined the galactic community. Speaker Varath visited Jack to discuss this development. This is significant progress. Your species is demonstrating the capacity for unity in the face of external challenge. It is one of the key indicators we look for. But we're still fighting wars, Jack pointed out. Still destroying the environment. Still letting people starve while others live in luxury. The big problems haven't gone away. No, but the trajectory has shifted. Social change operates on exponential curves. Jack Turner. It begins slowly, barely perceptible, but once it reaches a critical threshold, acceleration becomes rapid. You have pushed humanity toward that threshold. What happens next depends on whether your species reaches it before destroying itself. We are cautiously optimistic. As the first year after the broadcast drew to a close, Jack found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. From nobody cowboy to galactic ambassador, from ignorance to cosmic awareness, from solitary existence to being at the center of humanity's transformation. It had been overwhelming, terrifying, exhilarating, and exhausting all at once. But through it all, one thing remained constant. The memory of that moment in Copper Canyon when he'd chosen to help a stranger in need. Everything that followed had flowed from that single choice, like ripples spreading across a pond. It made Jack wonder how many other choices, made by how many other ordinary people, might carry similar potential if only they were brave enough to make them. Zalara had become a permanent fixture in his life, her presence both alien and familiar. They would sit together in the evenings, watching the stars that now held names and stories for Jack, and discuss humanity's progress. She had become not just his teacher, but his friend, and Jack had come to understand that friendship, like compassion, transcended biology. "Do you regret it?" she asked him one evening. "The choice you made? The life you lost?" Jack considered the question carefully. He thought about the simple cowboy he'd been, with his simple concerns and simple pleasures. He thought about the anonymity he'd had, the freedom from responsibility, the ease of a life lived small. Then he thought about everything he'd gained, the knowledge that humanity wasn't alone, the friendships with beings from across the stars, the opportunity to help guide his species towards something better, the privilege of being part of history in a way few ever were. "No," he said finally, "I don't regret it. I miss the simplicity sometimes, the quiet, but I think this is what I was meant to do. Not because I'm special, but because I was in the right place at the right time and made the right choice." And if my story can inspire other people to make similar choices, to help strangers, to bridge divides, to see the person beyond the surface, then everything I've given up has been worth it. You have grown much in this year, Jack Turner. When I first encountered you, you were already a good man. But now you are also a wise one. That is a rare combination. Jack smiled at that. I had a good teacher, and I had a good student. We have been fortunate in each other. The night deepened around them, and above, the stars shone with their eternal light. But now Jack knew that many of those stars held worlds where beings looked up at their own skies and wondered about the universe. And somewhere out there, perhaps on dozens or hundreds of worlds, people were hearing about Earth, a small blue planet whose people had just taken their first steps toward joining the cosmic community, led by a poor cowboy, who had shown that the content of one's character mattered more than the circumstances of one's birth. As the months turned into years, humanity slowly began to change. It wasn't a sudden transformation. There were setbacks, conflicts, moments when it seemed the old patterns would reassert themselves completely. But gradually, incrementally, progress was made. International cooperation increased. Investment in education and science accelerated. Environmental protection efforts gained unprecedented momentum. It wasn't that everyone suddenly became enlightened. Human nature remained human nature, with all its flaws and contradictions. But enough people had been inspired by the revelation of galactic neighbors to push for change, and slowly, that push began to move the immovable. Jack continued his work as humanity's ambassador, traveling the world to speak with leaders, scientists, ordinary citizens. He shared what he'd learned, answered questions, and most importantly, reminded people that the path forward lay not in waiting for salvation from above, but in doing the hard work themselves. The collective would offer knowledge, guidance, friendship, but humanity had to prove worthy of those gifts through their own efforts. 5 years after that first broadcast, the joint space mission reached the coordinates Jack had provided. The images they sent back of a massive structure orbiting in the outer solar system, clearly artificial, clearly waiting, sent shockwaves through the human population. Here was undeniable proof, verified by multiple nations' instruments, that Jack Turner had been telling the truth. The collective was real, the galaxy was watching, and humanity's place among the stars was no longer a question of if, but when. The probe made contact with the listening post's automated systems, and a message was transmitted back to Earth, not in words, but in mathematical sequences that formed images and concepts. It was an invitation, a welcome, and a challenge all at once. The collective acknowledged humanity's progress, but made clear that full membership would require continued growth. Specific benchmarks were outlined: reduction in armed conflicts, environmental sustainability metrics, advancement in social equity, demonstration of species-wide cooperation. These weren't demands, but guidelines, the standards that other civilizations had met before being welcomed into full galactic citizenship. They're giving us a roadmap, Jack explained in yet another global broadcast. They're not telling us we have to be perfect, no species ever is. But they are telling us we need to be better than we are right now. These benchmarks aren't arbitrary. They're the minimum requirements for a species to be trusted with faster-than-light technology, with access to settled worlds, with all the opportunities and responsibilities that come with galactic citizenship. And here's the thing. Every single benchmark they've given us is something we should want to achieve anyway, regardless of aliens or galactic communities. They're asking us to be the best version of ourselves. That's not too much to ask. The establishment of the listening post as a confirmed reality became a galvanizing force. Suddenly, the abstract concept of alien civilizations became concrete and immediate. The post became humanity's lighthouse, a goal to work toward, proof that the effort was worthwhile. Nations began to report their progress toward the benchmarks, turning the pursuit of galactic citizenship into a form of positive competition. Who could reduce their carbon emissions fastest? Which societies could best address inequality? What models of conflict resolution proved most effective? It wasn't perfect. There were nations that rejected the entire framework, that saw the collective's benchmarks as interference in human affairs. There were groups that preached isolation, that wanted humanity to develop on its own terms without alien influence. These voices were significant and caused genuine tensions. But the momentum of change, once started, proved difficult to stop. Too many people had seen the vision of what humanity could become, and they refused to let fear or stubbornness hold them back. Jack, now in his early 50s, found himself reflecting on the arc of history he'd witnessed and helped shape. His hair had gone gray, his face more lined, but his eyes still held the same kindness that had driven him to help a stranger in a canyon all those years ago. He'd watched humanity struggle and stumble, make progress and suffer setbacks, but overall, move forward. It was messy and slower than anyone might have hoped, but it was real change, bought with effort and sacrifice and the stubborn insistence that humans could be better than their worst impulses. Solara remained with him, her lifespan far exceeding human norms, and she'd become something of a minor celebrity herself. Her patient explanations of alien perspectives, her willingness to engage with even hostile questioners, a genuine affection for humanity despite all their flaws. These things had made her an effective ambassador in her own right. Together, she and Jack formed a partnership that symbolized the possibility of different species not just coexisting, but genuinely caring for one another. On the 10th anniversary of the first broadcast, Jack stood once again at the edge of Copper Canyon. A monument had been erected there, not to him, but to the principle he represented. It depicted a hand reaching down to help another hand reach up, with the inscription, "Compassion bridges all divides." People came from around the world to visit this spot, to stand where history had pivoted, to remind themselves of the simple truth that had changed everything. A ceremony was being held, attended by leaders from nations worldwide and, via holographic projection, by representatives from the collective. Speaker Vorath was there, as were dozens of other alien dignitaries. But also present were ordinary people, teachers, farmers, doctors, engineers, artists, all of whom had been inspired by Jack's example to make their own contributions to humanity as progress. Jack was asked to speak, and he approached the podium set up for the occasion with the same humble determination that had characterized his entire journey. He looked out at the assembled crowd, at the cameras broadcasting this moment to billions, and spoke from the heart as he always had. 10 years ago, I stood in this very spot and told the world that everything had changed, he began. I was right, but not in the way I thought. The change wasn't that aliens existed. They'd existed all along. The change wasn't even that we now knew about them. The real change was in how we saw ourselves. For the first time in human history, we had a mirror held up that showed us not just who we were, but who we could become. He paused, gathering his thoughts. These 10 years haven't been easy. We've had setbacks. We've had conflicts. People have died in wars that shouldn't have happened. We've lost species we should have protected. We failed in 1,000 ways, large and small. But we've also succeeded in ways our grandparents would have thought impossible. Global poverty has dropped by 40%. Armed conflicts have decreased by half. Renewable energy has become the norm rather than the exception. Educational access has expanded to reach children in every corner of the globe. We've made progress. Jack's voice grew stronger. But here's what I want you to understand. This progress isn't about impressing the aliens or meeting some external standard so we can get access to their technology. This progress is about us. About becoming the kind of species that can look at itself with pride. About building a world where every child has opportunity, where no one starves while others feast, where we're stewards of this beautiful planet rather than its destroyers. The collective didn't make us do any of this. We did it ourselves, because deep down, we knew it was right. He gestured to the monument behind him. This hand reaching down to help another up. It's not just about me helping Zilara. It's about every act of kindness. Every choice to see the person beyond the surface. Every moment when someone decides that compassion is more important than fear. Those moments happen millions of times every day, all over this planet. Most of them go unnoticed and unrecorded. But they add up. They accumulate. They change the world in ways that are invisible until suddenly they're not. Until suddenly you look around and realize that things are different, better, more hopeful. Jack's eyes swept across the crowd, connecting with individuals, acknowledging their presence. I'm often asked if I'm disappointed that we haven't achieved full collective membership yet, that we haven't met all the benchmarks. The answer is no, because I understand now what I didn't fully grasp 10 years ago. The journey is the point. Becoming the kind of species worthy of the stars is not a destination you arrive at and then stop. It's a continuous process of growth, of learning, of striving to be better than you were yesterday. The collective doesn't want us to be perfect. They want us to be committed to growth. And that we have proven beyond any doubt. He smiled then, a genuine expression of hope. 10 years ago, I was a poor cowboy who made a simple choice to help someone in need. Today, I'm still just Jack Turner, still that same person at my core. But I've had the privilege of watching humanity make similar choices on a global scale. I've seen nations that were enemies become partners. I've seen corporations that prioritize profit learn to value sustainability. I've seen people who feared differences learn to celebrate them. Not everyone, not all the time, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to change the trajectory of our species. Jack's voice dropped, becoming more intimate. To everyone listening, you are part of this story. The choices you make, the kindness you show, the bridges you build between yourself and others. These things ripple outward in ways you cannot imagine. You don't need to be special or educated or wealthy to make a difference. You just need to be willing to help when help is needed, to see beyond surface differences, to believe that we can be better. That's all I did. That's all any of us can do. But when billions of people do it together, it transforms worlds. He stepped back from the podium, and the crowd erupted in applause, not just the humans present, but the holographic aliens as well, each species showing approval in their own way. Speaker Varath approached, its metallic form gleaming in the desert sun. Jack Turner, the speaker said, its resonant voice carrying across the gathering. On behalf of the collective of aligned worlds, I am authorized to make an announcement. Based on humanity's demonstrated progress over the past decade, based on the changes your species has implemented, and the trajectory you have established, the collective has decided to accelerate your timeline for full membership consideration. We had estimated another century before humanity would be ready. We now believe it will be more like another generation, perhaps 30 years. The crowd gasped, the significance of this announcement sinking in. 30 years. Within the lifetime of people currently alive, humanity might join the galactic community as full members. This is not guaranteed, Speaker Varath continued. Much depends on whether you maintain this momentum, whether you continue to address the challenges that remain. But you have earned our faith, our willingness to invest more directly in your development. In the coming years, we will increase our presence, offer more direct guidance, share more knowledge. The training wheels, as you might say, are coming off. You have shown you are ready for more responsibility. Jack felt tears prick his eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. To see humanity recognized this way, to know that the struggle and sacrifice of millions had been witnessed and valued, it was more than he dared to hope for when he first stood at this podium a decade ago. As the ceremony concluded and people began to mingle, Jack found himself approached by a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, with bright eyes full of determination. "Mr. Turner," she said, slightly breathless with excitement, I just wanted to thank you. Because of your story, because of what you did, I chose to study xenobiology. I'm part of the team that will be going to the listening post on the next mission. We're going to meet them, talk to them, learn from them. And it's happening because you climbed down into that canyon to help someone who needed it. You changed my life. You changed all our lives. Jack smiled at her, seeing in her face the future he'd been working toward. No, he said gently. I started something, but people like you, people who took that beginning and ran with it, who dedicated themselves to building the future we all want, you're the ones changing the world. I just opened the door. You're the ones walking through it. The young woman's eyes shone with unshed tears. Then thank you for opening it. As she walked away, Jack felt Zalara's presence beside him. Her hand rested on his shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar over their years together. That is your legacy, Jack Turner, she said softly into his mind. Not the speeches or the monuments or the history books. It is the young people like her, inspired to be better, to reach farther, to build the future that previous generations only dreamed of. You planted seeds, and now you are beginning to see the forest that will grow from them. Will you stay? Jack asked. When humanity finally joins the collective, when all of this becomes normal rather than extraordinary, will you stay with us? With you, Zalara corrected. I will stay with you, my friend, for as long as you need me. We began this journey together. It seems fitting that we continue it the same way. The sun was setting over Copper Canyon, painting the sky in those same breathtaking shades of amber and crimson that had colored the evening when Jack's life changed forever. He stood at the canyon's edge looking down at the ledge where he'd found Zalara and thought about the mystery of cause and effect of how small choices could have massive consequences, of how the universe sometimes selected the most unlikely people for the most important roles. Somewhere in the crowd behind him, children were playing, laughing, their joy uncomplicated by the weight of history. They had been born into a world that knew about aliens, that was working toward galactic citizenship, that understood humanity's place in the larger cosmos. For them, this was simply reality, not revelation. They would be the first generation to grow up truly knowing they were part of something bigger than one small planet. And that, Jack thought, was perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. The extraordinary had become ordinary. The impossible had become normal. And humanity, messy and flawed, and still struggling with ancient demons, was nonetheless moving forward toward a future that would have seemed like pure fantasy just 10 years ago. Jack Turner, the poor cowboy who had simply tried to help someone in need, stood at the edge of that canyon and smiled. He didn't know what the next decades would bring, what challenges humanity would face, what wonders awaited in the stars. But he knew that whatever came, his species would face it with open hearts and reaching hands, ready to help and be helped in turn. The sky above the canyon began to fill with light as ships from 100 worlds decloaked themselves, becoming visible to human eyes. They hung there like jewels against the darkening sky, a promise and a reminder that humanity was no longer alone, that the universe was vast and full of friends waiting to be met. And at the center of it all, humble and human, stood Jack Turner, proof that heroes didn't need capes or powers or destiny. They just needed to make the right choice when the moment arrived, and then have the courage to follow that choice wherever it led, even if it led all the way to the stars.